By the time security opened Naomi Bell's locker, everyone already believed they knew what they would find. That morning, a certified fabric sample had disappeared. To them, Naomi was the rejected wife who had begged for a low-level job after Daniel Bell asked for a divorce, the clumsy worker who confused labels and asked questions no textile professional should need to ask. The security officer removed a bundle of cut supplier labels, a scorched sleeve, and a red rejection tag. Bianca stood behind him. "There," she said. She was preparing to sabotage the presentation. The labels were real. The sleeve came from the disputed shipment. But one label carried a batch number Naomi had never seen. Richard ordered her access placed under review. Cynthia told the workers that heartbreak had made Naomi dangerous. Daniel looked into the locker and gave the order everyone expected. Keep her away from the signing floor. Naomi held his gaze 1 second longer than anyone else noticed. An hour later, she entered the public anniversary hall using her family invitation. The hospital executives were seated. 3 trucks waited outside. On the screen, the shipment approval carried Naomi's old quality control code. Bianca performed a flame test on the new fabric. It passed. The guests looked at Naomi as if the argument were over. Bianca lifted the unburned sleeve. "Do you still want to accuse us?" "No," Naomi said, holding up a faded sample. "I want you to explain this." Richard frowned. "A piece of washed cloth? 25 industrial cycles." The hospital representative looked up. Naomi placed the red rejection tag beside the contract. "Your test proves the surface treatment works while the fabric is new," she said. "This shows what remained halfway through the 50-cycle requirement." The clock changed to 8:23, and behind Richard, one man stopped pretending he had never seen the original labels. 18 days earlier, no one at Bell Uniform Works had been looking at Naomi. That was how the family preferred her. Edward Bell had built the company from 6 sewing machines and a rented loading bay. After a scheduled heart procedure, he stepped away for a month and placed purchasing under his younger brother Richard's temporary control. Daniel remained responsible for production and the hospital contract, but Richard could approve suppliers, negotiate prices, and authorize shipments for 30 days. By the end of the first week, Daniel saw numbers that did not belong together. Material costs had risen 14%. Rejected garments had nearly doubled. Yet Richard's report claimed the new purchasing system had improved the company's margin. Daniel carried the report home one evening and left it beside his dinner plate. Naomi did not reach for the pages. Touching company papers in front of the Bells invited the same joke every time. Daniel's wife liked to feel involved. Instead, she picked up the fabric swatch clipped to the cover. The navy shade was close to the hospital sample, but the fibers reflected the kitchen light differently. The surface felt heavily finished rather than densely woven. When Naomi folded the corner, the crease held too sharply. "Is this from Haviland Textiles?" she asked. Daniel looked up. "That is what the receiving file says. It doesn't feel like their work." Richard, seated at the far end of the table, smiled. "You can identify a supplier by touching 2 inches of fabric?" "Not with certainty." Bianca laughed. "At least she knows that much." Victoria Bell, Daniel's mother, gave Bianca a warning glance. She was not cruel to Naomi, but she had accepted the family's assumption that a woman without a title had no serious place in the business. Daniel asked why the price had increased after the supplier change. "Freight, expedited production, market pressure," Richard replied. "The old company could not meet the schedule." "I solved the problem." "And the rejection rate?" "Your floor supervisors are still adjusting." Rosa Mendoza, who supervised cutting, was not there to defend her team. Neither were the operators whose bonuses would shrink if the losses continued. Naomi glanced at the swatch again. Bianca noticed. "Please don't start another investigation from the dining room." Daniel pushed back his chair. "That is enough, Naomi." She stared at him. He had never used that tone with her in front of his family. "Every time something changes here," he said, "you act as if no one can understand it without you." "I asked one question. You leave notes, question departments you do not work in, and expect me to explain it." Naomi's face tightened. "So, I embarrass you?" "What embarrasses me is pretending this marriage is working." Victoria stood. "Daniel, Maybe we should stop pretending and discuss a divorce. Once the word divorce entered the room, the entire table seemed to arrange itself around Naomi's humiliation. Cynthia looked down to hide her satisfaction. Naomi rose. I will not be removed from this family with an allowance and a quiet agreement. No one said that. You were about to. Daniel's jaw hardened. Then, what do you want? A job.
No.
Bianca blinked. If you believe I have done nothing since I married you, Naomi said, put me on the payroll. I will earn my own money until we decide what happens next. Richard laughed softly. Doing what? Whatever work you think I can do. Daniel waited before answering. Returns and alterations. Temporary assignment. No management access. No purchasing files. Fine. You report to the floor supervisors. Fine. To Bianca, placing Naomi among damaged uniforms and loose hems was not a risk. It was a public reduction. The next morning, word reached the factory before Naomi did. Daniel Bell's wife was coming to work because she would not accept the divorce. When Naomi entered the returns section in plain gray work clothes, people had already decided what kind of worker she would be. One operator whispered that the owner's wife would last until lunch. Naomi heard him. She also saw the puckered seams stacked beside his station and the way he kept rubbing two sore fingers. She answered neither the insult nor the evidence. She simply tied on an apron. Rosa handed Naomi a box of rejected garments and pointed toward 3 colored tags. Green goes back to production. Yellow waits for review. Red means do not touch it again. The tags slipped from Naomi's hand and scattered beneath the table. A few workers laughed. As she crouched to collect them, she saw the torn corner of a supplier label beneath the lowest shelf. A second code showed under the first. She left it there while they watched. At the end of the shift, Naomi opened her locker. A spool of red thread rested on a folded grocery list. Milk, rice, soap, coffee. One item appeared twice. Fabric softener. Naomi closed the locker and looked toward the warehouse doors. Richard had 17 days left in temporary control. For the first time, she was close enough to see what he was doing. By 7:30 on Naomi's second morning, the factory had already added details to her story. She had confused the colored tags, slowed the returns table, and asked questions any experienced worker should have understood. The wife who had refused to leave Daniel quietly was now failing at the small job he had given her. No one said it directly as she passed, but factory gossip needed little more than a glance at her gray apron. Rosa Mendoza placed a cart of rejected garments beside Naomi's table. Loose seams on the left, twisted sleeves on the right. Red tags stay untouched until I review them. If you slow the line, I send you home. That seems fair. The answer disappointed 2 operators waiting for an argument. Naomi began with a stack of Navy maintenance shirts. The first 3 puckered along the side panels. The fourth had a sleeve that had shortened more than the body after pressing. She set it in the wrong pile. Rosa caught it. Yellow, not green. Because of the sleeve? Because it cannot return to production until we know why it pulled. A few workers smiled. Naomi thanked her and moved the shirt. By 9, she had asked where the new fabric was stored, whether incoming rolls were weighed, and why some garments carried a different lot suffix from the cutting sheets. Bianca appeared before anyone answered the third question. You have been here 2 hours, and already people are complaining that you interrupt them. I was trying to understand the tags. The tags are colored. A laugh came from the steam tables. Naomi lowered her eyes. Then I will try to keep up. That would be a refreshing change. Bianca left believing she had reduced Naomi to the proper size. Naomi returned to the rejected shirts. The defects were not random. Seams pulled most often along panels cut across the fabric width. Sleeves shortened more than torsos. Pocket openings distorted after steam pressing. Different operators had worked on the pieces, yet the failures followed the cloth, not the hands. Near the pressing station, one operator pulled at a stiff shoulder seam while another rubbed a blistered thumb. A supervisor marked both garments as workmanship failures without examining the cloth. Naomi watched the numbers enter the rejection sheet. Every entry protected the supplier and made the people at the machines look careless. She carried a yellow tag jacket to Rosa. Who sewed this? Elena. 12 years here. And the cutter? Samir. 15. Naomi turned the cuff inside out. The stitching was even. The fabric around it had contracted. Did the rejection increase begin before or after the supplier change? Rosa looked toward Bianca's glass office. You ask too many questions for someone who cannot sort 3 colors. Then check the numbers yourself. At lunch, Cynthia sat with 2 coordinators and spoke loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Daniel is trying to be humane. Giving Naomi work is more generous than most men would be. Someone asked whether the divorce was final. Not yet. Naomi does not make endings easy. Naomi continued eating. Across from her, a young operator named Leah pushed over a packet of crackers. People talk more when they think you are too embarrassed to listen, Leah said. It was both kindness and warning. That afternoon, Rosa gave Naomi a box of replacement labels. Match these to the yellow-tagged garments. Do not attach anything until I check. 2 labels carried the name Haviland Textiles. 14 showed the same printed name, but their adhesive edges were thicker. Naomi pressed one with her thumbnail. A darker strip appeared underneath. She deliberately placed it beside the wrong lot sheet. Rosa corrected her. That suffix belongs to the new shipment. I thought the codes matched. They are supposed to. Rosa held the label closer to the light. Bianca stepped between them. Problem? Possibly a labeling error, Rosa said. There is no error. Bianca dropped the strip into a disposal bin. Starting today, all excess supplier labels are destroyed after every shift. No scraps in drawers. No samples in lockers. Bianca, we retain them until final inspection, Rosa said. Not anymore. Bianca faced the room. Production bonuses will also be reviewed. If people spent less time feeding Naomi's curiosity, perhaps rejected output would improve. The irritation around the tables shifted toward Naomi exactly as intended. After Bianca left, Naomi placed the morning's navy shirt over a cutting grid. The left panel had contracted almost half an inch. She measured a second shirt, then a third. Different operators, different machines, the same shrinkage direction. Rosa came closer. That is not a sewing error, Naomi said. No. It is not pressing, either. For weeks, Rosa's people had been blamed. Bonuses were threatened. Experienced operators had started questioning their own hands. Rosa wrote 3 lot numbers on the back of a yellow tag. Check these tomorrow. Do not tell Bianca I gave them to you. Naomi slipped it beneath her sleeve. At the end of the shift, workers still called her the clumsy wife. Rosa no longer laughed. The hospital delegation arrived on Thursday wearing visitor badges and expressions trained not to reveal concern. By then, Naomi had spent 4 days in returns and alterations. She knew which steam press ran too hot, which supervisor changed rejection codes before sending the daily report upstairs, and that the 3 lot numbers Rosa had written on the yellow tag all led back to the same week. That morning, Bianca ordered the floor cleared of visible defects. Nothing red tagged near the tour route, she said. Move disputed pieces to the rear cages. Rosa folded her arms. The hospital team asked to see quality review. They asked to see production readiness. That is not the same thing. Bianca turned toward Naomi. And yet somehow she has taught everyone to argue. Naomi continued trimming a loose thread from a return jacket. The delegation entered 20 minutes later. At its center was Helen Ward, the hospital system's director of facilities procurement. She did not inspect the polished display first. She watched the workers. Richard welcomed her beside a row of finished Navy uniforms. Our new supply arrangement has improved cost, stability, and turnaround, he said. Daniel stood near the production charts. His eyes did not move toward Naomi. Bianca lifted a jacket from the display rack. This is the final technical design for maintenance and industrial laundry teams. Naomi recognized the lot suffix on the cuff label. One of Rosa's 3 numbers. The jacket should not have been on the presentation rack. The disputed lot was still under internal review. Naomi approached Rosa. Was that released? No. Who moved it? Rosa looked toward the empty rear cage. Helen asked whether the production material matched the tested reference submitted with the bid. Completely, Richard said. Naomi saw the slight contraction along the sleeve seam. She stepped forward. Excuse me. That garment should be held for verification. The tour stopped. Helen looked between them. Is there a quality concern? No, Bianca said. There is an internal sorting issue. The lot number is on a hold list, Naomi said. Bianca removed the jacket from her reach. You are assigned to alterations. I know where I am assigned. Then return there. Naomi kept her attention on Helen. The production sheet and floor status do not match. A production coordinator reached for the hold sheet, but Bianca closed the clipboard before Helen could see it. There is no hold, she said. Only an employee who has misunderstood a training note. Cynthia gave the visitors an apologetic smile. My niece-in-law is going through a difficult transition. Daniel gave her temporary work so she could remain financially independent. The explanation turned Naomi from a worker raising a technical concern into a troubled wife interrupting a business tour. Helen did not smile back. Does she have a quality role? Not anymore, Bianca said. The words came too quickly. Bianca held up the jacket. This piece was reviewed. Naomi spent yesterday confusing lot labels and telling experienced operators their work was defective. I said the cloth was contracting. You could not sort green from yellow on your first morning. Bianca stepped closer. You do not become a textile professional because your husband owns a factory. Naomi noticed Daniel's hand settle on the edge of the chart stand. It was the same motion he used at home when forcing himself not to interrupt. Then he released it. The distinction mattered to her. It did not make the moment hurt less. Daniel finally moved. Naomi, he said, return to your station. We will review the discrepancy after the tour. The order sounded procedural, reasonable, final. Naomi looked at him. He offered no sign anyone else could read. She returned to the table. Richard resumed the presentation, but Helen did not follow immediately. She studied the cuff label before Bianca carried the jacket away. At noon, Rosa pushed a damaged pocket panel across Naomi's table. Inside seam, a narrow strip of the disputed fabric remained beneath the lining. Rosa had cut it before Bianca emptied the rear cage. You kept this? I kept what our procedure says we keep. Naomi folded the strip into an envelope. Rosa glanced toward Bianca's office. She asked whether you had access to quality records before you started here. What did you tell her? That wives usually know more than employees. It was not an answer Naomi liked, but it was useful. After the shift, Naomi used the returns terminal to check the lot's release status. Her access allowed only basic production records. The screen showed the jacket as conditionally approved. Reviewer code, NB, Q17. The code had been created 2 years earlier when she helped Daniel evaluate a failed supplier sample from home. It had never belonged to a formal position and should have expired after that review. She opened the audit date. The disputed lot had been approved under her code 3 weeks before she entered the factory. Before the argument at dinner. Before the rumors of divorce. Before anyone had reason to describe her as an angry wife. Footsteps passed outside. Naomi copied the timestamp onto the back of Rose's yellow tag, then closed the record. At the far end of the floor, Daniel was speaking with Richard beneath the production board. Someone had chosen Naomi as the explanation before she ever agreed to play the part. Marcus Hale kept the warehouse keys on a steel ring clipped to his belt. Naomi heard them before she saw him. The keys struck his thigh as he crossed the receiving floor, checked 2 loading slips, and stopped beside a row of navy fabric rolls marked with the same lot suffix she had copied from the audit screen. Rosa had warned her that Marcus noticed everything placed in the wrong location. He had managed the warehouse for 19 years and could identify most shipments by weight before opening the truck. That should have made him useful. Instead, he watched Naomi as if she were another item that had arrived without authorization. You are not cleared for receiving, he said. I was sent to collect replacement lining. Then collect lining. Naomi glanced at the nearest roll. The printed label showed Haviland Textiles, but the roll sat lower in its cradle than the older stock beside it. Do all rolls in this grade arrive at the same weight? Marcus stepped between her and the scale log. They arrive within tolerance. What is the tolerance? Not your department. Naomi picked up the box of lining and left without arguing. 10 minutes later, she returned with the wrong requisition form. Marcus corrected the receiving reference from memory, but it did not match the warehouse copy posted beside the door. When Naomi asked which number was valid, he crossed out both and wrote a third. Use this. One shipment now carried 3 references. By mid-morning, a delivery truck backed into Bay 2. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with silver hair, waited while Marcus examined the seal. Naomi brought a cart past them slowly enough to hear the driver say, "Same detour again?" Marcus lowered his voice. "Sign what is in front of you, Paul. I am asking because the seal was changed at Marrow Street." Marcus looked toward Naomi. She let the cart wheel strike a floor groove and pretended to struggle with it. Paul helped lift the front edge. "Thank you," she said. "Long route today?" "Longer than the paperwork says." Marcus closed the receiving door before Paul could add more. An hour later, Naomi found the truck entry on the floor terminal. The scheduled arrival time was 8:10 a.m. The recorded arrival was 7:42. She had watched the truck enter at 9:18. Someone had moved the time backward by 96 minutes. Marcus came up behind her. "That terminal is for returns. I was checking whether my lining had arrived." He reached past her and closed the record. "You should stop opening screens you do not understand." Naomi turned. "Did the truck stop at Marrow Street?" His face gave her nothing. "Return to your station." At lunch, Rosa unfolded the 3 lot numbers from the yellow tag. "The rolls should weigh within 2 pounds of the certified baseline," she said. "The new ones feel lighter." "Can we confirm that?" "Marcus keeps the scale sheets. And Marcus is changing receiving times." Rosa frowned. "He has protected this floor longer than Bianca has worked here." "That does not mean he is protecting it now." After lunch, Bianca ordered all supplier remnants removed from cutting. She stood beside a disposal cage while workers dropped trimmed edges, paper bands, and excess labels into clear bags. Marcus supervised the collection. She saw him take 1 sheet from the top of a scale clipboard. He folded it once and slipped it beneath his jacket before handing the remaining pages to Bianca. It could have been evidence. It could also have been a record he planned to alter. At 3, Naomi returned to the warehouse with a yellow tag jacket and asked for replacement fabric. Marcus refused. "The lot is closed. The garment is still under review. The material record says it passed. Under my code." His expression shifted not with surprise, but recognition. "You knew that code belonged to me." Marcus checked the aisle behind her. "Go back to returns." "Who entered it?" "I said leave." He gripped the cart until his knuckles paled. Fear, Naomi thought, not anger. Before she could press him, Bianca's heels sounded from the loading bay. Marcus pulled approved lining from a cabinet and placed it on Naomi's cart. "Wrong department," he said loudly. "Again." Bianca smiled at Naomi. "At least she is consistent." Near the aisle entrance, a paper strip clung to the cart wheel. Naomi waited until the warehouse doors closed before lifting it. It was the torn corner of a scale sheet. Certified weight, 62.4 pounds. Received weight, 54.9. Below the numbers, someone had written a new time over the original arrival entry. Naomi folded the strip into her sleeve. Behind the warehouse window, Marcus watched her find it. He did not call Bianca. But he did not look relieved, either. 2 days after Naomi found the torn scale sheet, Bianca announced a safety demonstration over the factory intercom. "All department supervisors are to report to the finishing floor at 11. We will review the thermal performance concerns that have disrupted production." No one needed Naomi's name to know who the concern was. By 10:30, workers had cleared a space beside the pressing line. Richard arrived with 2 managers, Daniel and Helen Ward from the hospital system, who had returned to review the production schedule. Naomi had not been told Helen would attend. Bianca placed 3 fabric squares on a steel tray. "These were cut from the active shipment," she said. "The same material Miss Bell has repeatedly suggested is unsafe." Naomi studied the edges. The squares were darker than the cloth on the cutting tables. Their surfaces carried a faint sheen and a stronger chemical odor. "Which roll did those come from?" "The approved lot." "That is not a roll number." Richard stepped forward. "This is a demonstration, not a trial." Bianca clamped one square to the tray and held a small burner against its edge. The surface blackened. A thin curl of smoke rose. When she withdrew the flame, it went out. She repeated the test on a second square with the same result. Several supervisors exchanged relieved looks. Helen asked, "Is that the test required by the contract?" "It is a standard field confirmation," Richard said. "Formal certification is already on file." Naomi kept watching the tray. The treated surface had hardened into a glossy shell. Fabric from the production line had never felt that heavily finished. Bianca lifted the square with tongs. 2 samples, 2 passes. Then she faced Naomi. "You questioned receiving records and frightened workers over material you apparently do not understand. I asked for verification. You told the floor the cloth was failing. I said it was contracting. And now fire-resistant fabric has survived a flame." A few people laughed. Cynthia leaned toward a hospital coordinator. Daniel hoped work would give her structure while the separation was handled privately. Naomi saw Helen hear it. Daniel stepped closer to the production charts. "The demonstration is complete. Return everyone to the line." His tone left her no opening. Bianca was not finished. She should correct the record first. Richard looked at Naomi. "Do you still believe the shipment should be held?" A direct yes would allow them to frame instinct against visible proof. Naomi picked up the untested square. The chemical smell clung to her fingers. "I believe this sample and the production cloth should be compared under the contract protocol." Bianca laughed. "So the test counts only when you win?" "It counts when it measures what the uniforms are required to survive." Richard removed the square from her hand. "We are not delaying a major contract because Daniel's wife discovered a new hobby." The insult traveled farther than the laughter. Helen closed her folder. "Send me the written test reference and current certificate by the end of the day." "Of course," Richard said. By lunch, the story had spread. The fabric had passed. Naomi had been wrong. The word clumsy was becoming unstable. At the returns table, Leah avoided her eyes. Even Rosa kept her attention on the cutting schedule. Naomi worked until a yellow tag jacket returned from pressing. Its cuff carried far less chemical odor than the demonstration squares. She brought it to Rosa. "Smell this." "I saw the test." "Smell it." Rosa leaned closer. Her expression tightened. "The coating is lighter." Or the stage sample was treated differently. Rosa checked the aisle, then opened a locked drawer beneath her cutting table. Inside lay the strip she had saved from the disputed lot, and an older approved Haviland sample. Naomi placed the 3 materials side by side. The demonstration square had the heaviest finish. The production strip had less. The approved Haviland cloth had almost no surface odor, yet its weave was denser. "Fire resistance can come from the fiber, the finish, or both," Naomi said. "A fresh coating may pass once. That does not show what remains after industrial laundering." "How many cycles does the hospital require?" 50. The number changed Rosa's face. A field flame test could impress a room. It could not prove long-term performance. They cut narrow strips from inside already rejected garments, so nothing appeared missing. Naomi sealed 1 sample from production, 1 from the heavily treated demonstration material, and 1 from the older approved stock. That evening, she carried the envelopes to an independent textile laboratory. She requested laundering simulation, shrinkage comparison, and thermal testing at intervals. The technician reviewed the requirement. 50 cycles will take time. How soon can you show whether performance is declining? Preliminary results after 10, a stronger trend after 25. The hospital review had been moved forward. Naomi had 6 days. When she returned to her car, a message waited from Daniel. Found invoices. Need actual manufacturer price. Naomi typed, "Test passed today." Wrong test. Below it, she wrote another sentence, then erased it. They believed her. The laboratory called Naomi at 6:12 the next morning. After 10 simulated industrial washes, the production sample had lost nearly a third of its surface protection. Shrinkage had also increased along the crosswise grain. The heavily treated demonstration square performed better, but its coating was already breaking unevenly. The older Haviland sample showed no comparable decline. Naomi requested the preliminary report and expedited the 25-cycle results. When she ended the call, another message waited from Daniel. Laundry on West Mercer, 10:30 p.m. Bring nothing electronic. The laundromat had closed years earlier. Daniel's college friend owned the building and used the back room for storage. It was the last place Richard would expect them to meet. Naomi entered through the alley. Daniel stood beside a folding table covered with invoices, shipping records, and handwritten notes. "You were followed?" he asked. "No." "You are sure?" "I left through a grocery loading entrance." "I am sure." He reached for the laboratory envelope. Naomi kept it in her hand. "What did you find?" Daniel turned one invoice toward her. Bell Uniform Works had paid Northbridge Supply $8.40 per yard for the disputed fabric. Another document showed Northbridge purchasing similar material from Eastvale for $3.10. "Northbridge has no manufacturing site," Daniel said. "It exists to receive one invoice and issue another." "Who owns it?" "The filing ends at a Delaware holding company." "I have not connected it to Richard." "So you have a price gap without the person receiving it. And you have failing fabric without proof that the shipment came through Northbridge." Naomi placed the report beside the invoices. "Then neither of us has enough." Daniel read the first page. "This can stop the contract. It can delay it. Richard will say the laboratory tested the wrong sample or that I altered it. Rosa can confirm the source. Bianca will say Rosa is protecting her department." For nearly 2 weeks, everyone else had believed their marriage was collapsing. The truth had begun earlier that afternoon, before the family dinner, when Daniel privately showed Naomi a preliminary copy of the cost report. She compared the old and new samples and warned that a direct audit would alert whoever was changing the records. On the drive to dinner, they rehearsed the direction of the argument. Not every word, only the direction. Daniel would accuse Naomi of interfering. Divorce would be introduced as a possibility. Naomi would demand a floor job where purchasing records met physical material. The red spool in Naomi's locker meant Daniel had found a physical link in the purchasing records. Repeating fabric softener on the grocery list meant she should investigate what industrial laundering did to the cloth. They had chosen ordinary household objects because Bianca would dismiss them as proof that Naomi belonged nowhere near technical work. Richard had accepted the bait faster than they expected. "So this was your plan," Naomi said. "Financial records on your side, fabric on mine. Our plan was suspending me part of it." Daniel's eyes lifted. "No. You did it quickly. Richard was waiting for me to defend you. If I had, he would have moved the files. You could have warned me. There was no safe way. There is always a safe way when the person taking the risk is not you. That is not fair. Neither was listening to Cynthia tell a hospital director I was too desperate to accept a divorce. I heard her. You let her finish." His silence was different here, without an audience to mislead. They had established limits. No attacks on Naomi's parents. No accusations involving children. No suggestion that she had married Daniel for money. If anyone threatened her physically, the cover ended. Cynthia had crossed one of those lines. Daniel had chosen not to stop her. "I knew the silence was part of the plan," Naomi said. "I just did not know it would sound so real." Daniel looked down. "I thought one more minute would give us one more record." "And did it?" "Yes." The answer hurt because it was honest. He pulled an access log from the table. Naomi's old quality control code had been reactivated from an administrative terminal. The request traced back to a document Daniel had emailed Richard 8 months earlier during a supplier dispute. The attachment contained Naomi's temporary reviewer number. "I gave him the file that exposed your code," Daniel said. "You did not know what he would do." "No. But I treated your work like an extension of mine. No title, no protected account, no record of your authority except when I needed it." Naomi had agreed to work behind the scenes because it seemed easier than fighting for a place in the company. Daniel had benefited from that arrangement. So had everyone now claiming she had never contributed. "This did not begin with Richard," she said. "I know. You know he abused it. That is not the same thing." Daniel did not defend himself. A dryer door shifted in the draft and tapped its frame. Naomi pointed to the next testing stage. "We need the 25-cycle result, the original mill price, the seal record from Marrow Street, and proof of who controls Northbridge. I can get the ownership trail. I need Marcus's scale sheets. He may be helping them. Or he may be afraid. What makes you think that? He knew my code. When I confronted him, he looked scared before Bianca arrived. Daniel separated the invoices into stacks. The hospital moved final acceptance to the anniversary event. 5 days. Then we continue. He reached for her hand. Naomi moved the report instead. Continue the investigation, she said. Do not confuse that with everything being fine. Daniel lowered his hand. She left him beside the silent machines and carried the report into the alley. The divorce was false, the damage was not. At 7:14 on the morning of the anniversary event, Naomi's access card failed at the employee entrance. The reader flashed red twice. A security guard checked the screen. Your account is under review. By whose order? Before he could answer, Bianca crossed the lobby carrying a folder sealed with a yellow evidence strip. Mine, she said. And Richard's. Behind her stood 2 security officers and the company's human resources manager. Bianca held up a missing sample report. A certified specimen was removed from the testing cabinet. The access log places you in the quality corridor after hours. I was at the laboratory. Then you will have no objection to opening your locker. Workers arriving for the early shift slowed near the turnstiles. Cynthia stood beside the anniversary display, making no attempt to send them away. Naomi looked toward Daniel's office above the production floor. His blinds were open. He was already watching. They took her through the returns department. Rosa stepped away from the cutting table. Leah stopped feeding labels into a printer. No one asked why 3 managers and 2 guards were escorting a woman to a locker she had used for less than 3 weeks. Bianca gave the key to security. The first items were ordinary: work gloves, a spare apron, a grocery list, and the red spool Daniel had used for their first signal. Bianca glanced at the thread, then dismissed it with the rest. Then the officer found a scorched sleeve beneath the folded apron. The evidence seal matched the specimen Bianca had reported missing that morning. A bundle of trimmed supplier labels followed. Last came a red rejection tag. Cynthia exhaled as if the evidence had disappointed her only because it was so obvious. There, Bianca said. She was preparing to sabotage tonight's presentation. Naomi did not touch the items. The sleeve came from the disputed shipment. Some of the labels matched scraps Bianca had ordered destroyed, but one batch number ended in 06K, not any of the 3 numbers Rosa had given her. Naomi had never seen it. That was the flaw. The evidence had not been assembled from what she had taken. It had been prepared from a file broader than her own investigation. Who reported the sample missing? Naomi asked. I did, Bianca said. When? 6:40 this morning. And when was my locker last inspected? The human resources manager glanced at the form. Last night. 9:10. By whom? Bianca closed the folder before he answered. Richard arrived with Daniel. He looked at the open locker, then at the workers gathering beyond the aisle. This has gone far enough, Richard said. Call the police after the hospital representatives leave. Naomi watched Daniel read the evidence without bending to examine it. He knew better than to accept cut labels without chain of custody records. He knew the scorched sleeve proved nothing. He also knew Richard was studying him. Daniel turned to the security supervisor. Formalize Naomi's suspension and remove her from all company systems. Rosa stared at him. Naomi had agreed that Daniel might need to distance himself from her. She had not agreed that he could erase her access before she copied the final records. You are suspending me based on material found in an unsecured locker? She asked. I am suspending you pending review. Tonight's shipment will be approved under my code. We will address that separately. When? Daniel's expression did not move. Not here. The answer sounded like protection to no one. Security collected the items. Naomi watched the 06K label disappear into Bianca's folder. As they escorted her toward the exit, she saw Marcus's office door standing open. His desk had been cleared. The steel key ring was gone. Rosa followed far enough to whisper, Marcus did not report for work. Did he call? No. Richard says he falsified receiving records and resigned. Marcus had managed the warehouse for 19 years. He would not leave without his keys. and he would not clear his desk before dawn unless someone wanted the floor to believe he had run. Outside, 3 freight trucks were already lined along the loading wall. They were not scheduled until 9 that evening. Paul, the silver-haired driver, stood beside the first cab while a supervisor checked a replacement seal. He saw Naomi and looked away too quickly. Bianca came through the doors behind her. "The hospital asked us to stage the shipment early," she said. "It demonstrates readiness. It also moves the fabric before the acceptance file closes. You no longer work here. Then stop using my code." Bianca's face sharpened. For the briefest moment, Naomi knew she had touched the truth. Then Cynthia joined them with the hospital welcome packets. "You should go home," she told Naomi. "Do not make Daniel choose between this company and a marriage that is already over." Naomi looked through the glass doors at Daniel. He was speaking to Richard beneath the anniversary banner. He did not come outside. At 8:03, Naomi left the property under escort. At 8:11, Rosa sent a photograph of a document pulled from the warehouse printer. It was a draft incident report naming Marcus as the person who had altered receiving times, accepted incorrect weights, and released mislabeled fabric. Below his name was a second line. Unauthorized quality approval. Naomi Bell, reviewer code NB, Q17. The report had been created 3 days earlier, before the sample disappeared. Before anyone searched her locker. Naomi enlarged the footer. Prepared for executive review after shipment release. They had not planted evidence because she was getting close. They had always intended to make her the ending. Marcus contacted Naomi from a payphone outside Street Ann's rehabilitation center. He did not say his name. He said, "The weight sheets were never destroyed," and hung up. Naomi reached the parking structure 20 minutes later. Marcus stood on the 3rd level beside a concrete pillar, still wearing yesterday's warehouse shirt. Without the steel ring at his belt, he looked unfinished. "You should not have come," he said. "You called me. I needed to know whether Richard had sent the police. He has not. He is waiting until after the hospital signs." Marcus glanced toward the rehabilitation center across the street. A woman in a wheelchair appeared behind the glass entrance while an aide adjusted her blanket. "My wife," Marcus said. "Bell Uniform Works covers what insurance does not. Richard controls the hardship account while Edward is away." Naomi understood. He threatened to stop paying. He asked whether a man with altered warehouse records should still receive company generosity. Marcus opened a worn document case. Inside were photocopied scale sheets, original seal numbers, receiving logs, and 3 supplier labels cut in long strips. Naomi did not touch them. "How much did you change?" "Arrival times on 6 shipments. Receiving references on 4. I signed 2 weight entries I knew were false." "Why keep copies?" "The first time Richard told me to correct a number, he said it was temporary. The second time, he said no one would remember the original. I decided one of us should." Naomi remembered the torn scale corner caught beneath her cart wheel. "You left that sheet for me. I dropped it where you would see it. Then I spent 2 days hoping you had not. You could have come forward." I was still telling myself altered numbers were not the same as dangerous cloth. The copied scale sheets showed the disputed rolls averaging 54 to 56 pounds against a certified baseline above 62. The seal records placed every shipment at Marrow Street, while an original label named Eastvale as the manufacturer and Northbridge only as the invoicing middle company. Marcus separated one cut label from the case. 06K never entered receiving. It belonged to a demonstration packet stored in purchasing. The records linked the truck, the lighter cloth, and the false supplier identity. Ownership of Northbridge was the only missing piece, and Daniel was working on it. Marcus looked at her. "So the divorce is not real." Naomi closed the case. "That is not the part you need to decide whether to help." He had found the draft incident report in Richard's printer queue the previous afternoon. It named him as responsible for altered times, incorrect weights, and broken seals. Naomi's reviewer code covered the quality approval. Once the trucks left, the company could call it collusion between a warehouse manager and an angry wife. "They were going to fire my receiving team," Marcus said. Richard said it would look more believable if one supervisor had pressured the others. "Where are the originals?" "Safe." "That is not enough." His expression hardened. You think I do not know what enough costs? I think Richard does. That is why he chose your wife's treatment. Marcus looked across the street. If you give me copies and disappear, they will call them stolen, Naomi said. If you stand behind the records, they must explain why every false entry benefits the same supplier. And if the company stops paying for her care? I cannot promise they will not try. I can promise we put the threat into the record before Richard uses it again. Marcus removed the monthly scale summary. Beside every disputed roll, the original weight had been replaced by a heavier figure. At the bottom, Richard had written, standardized to certificate baseline before executive report. Marcus's initials sat beneath it, not innocence, but proof. He gave Naomi the case. I will speak if the workers are protected first. They have to agree for themselves. Then ask them. Rosa was waiting in her car 2 levels below. She had brought Leah and Tomas, the warehouse clerk whose login appeared on 3 altered entries. Tomas looked sick when Marcus approached. They told me you resigned. They wanted you to believe I left you the blame. Marcus showed him the draft report. Tomas found his name in an attachment marked supporting personnel. They said correcting the time was an inventory adjustment. They said many things, Marcus replied. Rosa placed the retained cutting sample beside the original Eastvale label. The lot suffixes matched. Leah opened a folder of bonus deductions. Every increase in rejected garments had been charged to production teams while purchasing reported improved margins. The evidence no longer belonged to one frightened person. Naomi's phone vibrated. Daniel had sent a vendor onboarding disclosure and 1 sentence. Northbridge beneficial owner, Cynthia Bell's brother. A second message arrived. Bianca found my search. Richard moved the board vote to 8:40. They plan to secure acceptance first, then remove me before I can challenge the report. The hospital signing remained at 8:30. 10 minutes later, Richard intended to secure control of the company. Naomi looked at Marcus, Rosa, Leah, and Tomas. Tonight they will say this is a family dispute, she said, so the truth cannot arrive as a family argument. Marcus took back 1 original scale sheet. No, he said. It arrives from the people they planned to bury. At 8:17 p.m., Naomi entered the anniversary hall through the public doors. Her employee badge no longer worked, but the invitation still carried her married name. Security moved toward her. Helen Ward raised 1 hand. She raised a documented quality objection during my last visit, Helen said. I will hear it before I sign. That did not make Naomi welcome. It only made removing her more expensive. White tablecloths covered inspection tables. The company's history played across a screen behind the contract table. Beyond the loading doors, 3 trucks waited with seals fixed. Richard stood beside the hospital executives. Bianca held the Navy work jacket from the demonstration. Cynthia watched Naomi approach as if a family embarrassment had ignored its final warning. Daniel remained near the board members gathering for the 8:40 vote. No one beside Naomi knew whether he would help her. Bianca stepped into her path. You were suspended. I was invited. You were ordered away from the signing floor. Naomi held up the faded laboratory sample. Then sign without asking what this became after 25 industrial washes. Bianca faced the guests and repeated the flame test. The sleeve blackened at the edge. When the burner moved away, the flame died. Several managers applauded. Richard allowed it to settle. The shipment performs as certified, he said. Mrs. Bell removed company samples, frightened workers, and interfered with a contract while her marriage was failing. Cynthia added, Daniel tried to give her dignity. A document appeared on the screen. Reviewer code, NB, Q1, 7. Richard pointed to it. The shipment was approved under Naomi's own credentials. Now that she is leaving the family, she wants to deny the work attached to her name. Bianca lifted the unburned sleeve. Do you still want to accuse us? No, Naomi said. I want you to identify what you tested. The production fabric. Which roll? The approved lot. That is not a roll number. Richard moved toward the contract. We are not turning this ceremony into a technical argument. It became one when you asked a hospital system to accept protective clothing. Naomi placed the red rejection tag beside the signature page. Helen checked the clock. You have 5 minutes. Naomi set the faded sample beside Bianca's glossy sleeve. Your demonstration proves the surface treatment works while the fabric is new. The contract requires protection after 50 industrial wash cycles. This production sample lost almost a third of its performance after 10. At 25, it failed the required threshold. Bianca answered immediately. A sample you stole and could have altered. That is why the laboratory tested 3. Naomi placed the report on the table. 1 came from the production seam Rosa retained under written procedure. 1 came from your demonstration material. 1 was the original Haviland reference. Rosa stepped forward. I cut the production sample before Bianca ordered the remnants destroyed. Richard changed the attack. Even if a supplier delivered inconsistent treatment, that proves poor manufacturing. It does not prove misconduct here. Then explain the certificate, Naomi said. Helen opened the copy Naomi handed her. The certification date preceded the disputed fabric's production date by 4 months. The construction listed a 62-pound roll baseline. Marcus's sheets showed the delivered rolls averaged less than 56. Helen placed the 2 pages side by side. The numbers did not merely differ. They described different material. Warehouse errors, Richard said. Marcus emerged beside the loading doors, carrying his steel keyring and 1 scale sheet bearing Richard's handwriting. Those were the original weights. He ordered me to replace them with the certificate baseline. Richard's face hardened. A man under investigation is not reliable. Then compare my copies with the server history you tried to assign to me. Naomi gave Helen the original supplier label. East Vale Technical Fabrics manufactured the cloth. Northbridge Supply invoiced Bell Uniform Works. Daniel stepped away from the board table and connected his laptop to the display. The screen changed to 2 invoices. East Vale sold the fabric to Northbridge for $3.10 per yard. Northbridge billed Bell Uniform Works $8.40. Daniel advanced to the vendor onboarding disclosure. Northbridge has no mill, warehouse, or testing department. Its vendor onboarding file identifies Cynthia's brother as the beneficial owner. Cynthia stood. My brother introduced a supplier. That is not fraud. No, Daniel said. The altered certificates, hidden price, and payments routed through his consulting account make it fraud. Richard tried once more. Daniel is using a marital dispute to remove me before a board vote. Naomi had access to the code. Marcus changed the records. The rest is inference. Daniel changed the display to the access log. Naomi's code was reactivated through Bianca's administrative credentials at 2:14 a.m., 3 weeks before Naomi entered the factory. Tomas left the workers' row carrying the draft incident report. This was printed 3 days before Naomi's locker was searched. It names Marcus and the warehouse team as responsible after shipment release. My login is listed, but Bianca used it while I was unloading Bay 3. Leah followed with the bonus records. Production workers were charged for defects that began with the supplier change. Purchasing reported those deductions as improved margin. Bianca looked at the employees who had once laughed at Naomi. You are risking every job here over 1 disputed shipment. Rosa answered her. No. You risked them when you told us to sew through it. The screen clock changed to 8:29. Helen closed the electronic acceptance file without signing. Shipment hold. All 3 trucks remain sealed pending independent review. Richard turned toward the board. This changes nothing about the 8:40 vote. Daniel faced them. It changes the report. The profit increase came from inflated invoices, reduced material quality, and deductions taken from workers. Richard pointed at Naomi. You expect this board to believe the divorce was staged so she could spy on her own family? Daniel looked at Naomi. Yes. The hall reacted more strongly to that than to the invoices. Cynthia stared at Daniel. Bianca looked toward Richard, waiting for a denial he could not provide. He explained the argument, her request for a floor job, and the 2 separate investigations. For one moment, the plan sounded clean. Naomi knew better. She looked at Daniel, then at the workers who had watched him suspend her. The marriage was staged, she said. The humiliation wasn't. Daniel lowered his eyes. Naomi turned back to Helen and the board. Stop the vote. Preserve the records. Protect every worker who speaks. Then, replace the shipment before anyone discusses who controls this company. No one applauded. That was not what she had come for. At 8:31, the hospital contract remained unsigned. At 8:40, the board chair removed Richard's resolution from the agenda. Outside, the 3 trucks did not move. The 3 trucks remained under seal until dawn. By noon, Helen Ward had appointed an independent laboratory to retest the shipment. Bell Uniform Works suspended Richard and Bianca from every purchasing and quality system. Cynthia's access to supplier events and company accounts was revoked. Northbridge Supply received a termination notice and a preservation demand for its invoices, bank records, and ownership documents. No one called the situation a misunderstanding. The 25-cycle report was confirmed 2 days later. The production cloth no longer met the hospital's thermal performance requirement. The demonstration squares had received a heavier surface treatment than the garments on the line. The hospital did not cancel the contract. It placed Bell Uniform Works under corrective review and required every replacement lot to pass independent testing. The company would absorb the cost of new material, overtime, and delayed transport. Edward Bell returned to the factory before his doctor wanted him there. He listened while Marcus admitted changing arrival times and waits. Marcus did not ask to be excused. He asked that the records show why he had complied and who had been threatened. The hardship fund for his wife's treatment was transferred to an independent administrator. Tomas, Leah, Rosa, and the receiving team signed protected witness statements. Their lost bonuses were restored. The draft report naming them as responsible was preserved for the investigation. Richard's temporary authority ended immediately. Bianca lost purchasing access and faced review for falsified certificates, planted evidence, and unauthorized use of Naomi's code. Cynthia was removed from supplier relationships. Edward did not defend them because they were family. He also did not pretend the company had been innocent before they acted. We built a system where one relative could choose the supplier, approve the price, and control the explanation, he told the board. They abused it because we made abuse easy. The new controls divided those powers. Purchasing could select vendors but not approve quality. Quality could stop a shipment without family authorization. Warehouse staff retained original weights and seals in an outside archive. A worker representative received a sealed sample from every lot. Naomi's old code was retired. No one would use her work without her name again. Daniel offered her the title of Quality and Materials Director 3 days after the signing was halted. Naomi read the written authority before she looked at the title. It gave her power to stop production, order independent testing, and report to the compliance committee. No member of the Bell family could override her alone. This is what the role should have been, Daniel said. Yes. Naomi closed the folder. I will accept it. Relief crossed his face, but she did not let him mistake that answer for another one. I am not coming back to the house yet. Daniel nodded. I understand. No. You understand that I am angry. That is not the same as understanding what happened. He did not argue. Naomi told him the plan had succeeded because people believed his contempt. That belief had grown from years in which he accepted her work privately while allowing the company to treat her as an unofficial assistant. He had not created the family's view of her, but he had benefited from it. I thought trusting you in private was enough, he said. It was comfortable for you. Daniel looked at the folder between them. What do I do now? Stop asking me to make the repair easy. Over the following weeks, replacement fabric arrived from the original mill. The workers were paid through the delay. Rosa supervised new cutting trials. Marcus returned under a corrective agreement rather than being treated as either innocent or disposable. Daniel and Naomi met outside the Bell house. Sometimes they discussed the company. Sometimes they did not. He began correcting people when they described the investigation as his plan. It had been theirs. The injury had belonged to her. 6 weeks later, the first replacement shipment reached the receiving floor. Leah carried the old box of inspection tags to Naomi's table. Several corners were bent from the morning Naomi had scattered them beneath the return station. Still having trouble with these? Leah asked. Naomi opened the box. Green meant approved, yellow meant hold, red meant stop. She selected a sample from the first roll, checked the weave beneath the inspection light, compared its weight and seal number, then reviewed the independent certificate. The first roll passed. The second did not. Naomi attached a red tag to its paper band. Across the floor, Daniel stood beside the production board. He saw the tag but did not step toward her or ask for an exception. The line supervisor looked from the stopped roll to the waiting machines. "Do we stop the line?" Naomi closed the inspection folder. "We already did." The rejected roll remained beneath the red tag. Only after Naomi fastened a green tag to the next verified shipment did the machines begin to move.